Welcome to the Overcommitted podcast, where we talk about our code commits, our personal commitments, and some stuff in between. I'm your host, Brittany Ellick, joined today by
Erica.
Hey, it's John.
we are a group of software engineers who initially met together on the same team at GitHub and found a common interest in continuous learning and building cool things. We continue to meet and share the things that we're learning and discuss our lives as developers. Whether you are pushing code or taking on new challenges, we are so happy you are listening. This week, we're going to talk about a very exciting topic: software engineering ethics and social media. This is something that I feel like we have alluded to quite a bit in the past and something we've talked about a lot. And we will talk a little bit about what this issue actually is and what our thoughts are around tackling it. So, to start with, I want to set the stage and talk to Erica and John a little bit about your first relationship with social media. I feel like we're all around the same age, like mid 30s ish millennials who, really were coming to adulthood around the same time that social media was first introduced. So I want to know sort of like what that felt like when you were, experiencing it for the first time.
Well, I'm in my early 30s. Thank you very much. Don't age me. But yeah, I could go ahead and answer. It's like I remember I have two older sisters that are like 8 years older than me, and my sister was at she was at college, and Facebook came out, and she was like using because like Facebook initially I think just rolled out to colleges, and she was at UCSB, and she had Facebook. So Facebook was definitely like the first social media platform I remember using, and I just remember, going on it, and like when you had like a high school girlfriend or boyfriend, you would make it Facebook official. I remember that being a thing, and I never really liked social media, and was always I feel like the it's always been weird to me to like post things due to like the impermanence of it all, and like it's kind of broadcasting, and I feel like I was always like, this is silly, like people are posting kind of mundane aspects of their lives, but um that's kind of the point. So yeah, Facebook was definitely my first social media interaction.
Yeah. So discounting AOL Instant Messenger, which is not social media, but I feel like is proximate in sort of like the pull that it had on my life as like a a young teenager. And like the obsession I remember of like wanting to go home and log on to AIM and all the drama that happened over Instant Messenger. Um, my first social media platform was MySpace. And yeah, I definitely remember the like you're like top 10 friends, I think, and
Top 8.
top 8. Okay, yeah.
Mhm.
And like wow, over analyzing that. I mean, the amount of brain space and emotional energy I spent into like thinking about who my top friends were and whose top friends list I was in. I will never get that life back, and uh deeply regret all of that. So I didn't actually create my own Facebook profile. I had when I was at summer camp, friend like a summer camp friend set up my profile for me, and for a good like 2 years of my life it was entirely like jokes and made up. Like none of it was actually relevant to my life. Um I think it said I was like related to Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen or something like that. Some inside joke that was hilarious at the time. Um yeah, so that was my introduction. How about you, Brittany?
Yeah, I started with MySpace and I remember the agony over, deciding the top 8. And when you were fighting with a friend, you're like, oh, I'm going to remove you from my top 8 or something. Like there was a lot of drama around it. I also, yeah, started on Facebook pretty, I think it was like late high school, early college. I remember it was in the days when you still could only have like 20 pictures on your Facebook maximum. And so like you had to really think about what you put there. And yeah, I think the biggest thing that I remember is like it was really exciting at the time, maybe in part because I was, a teenager, but also because it was like this new way to interact with your friends. And, I was graduating from high school. So it was a way that I could keep up with all these people that I probably would otherwise not have kept up with. And yeah, put a lot of mundane things out there, about like, "Oh, what's on your mind?" And it would be like, "I'm thinking about this," or "I'm listening to this song," or like whatever like nonsense that, 17, 18-year-old me cared about at the time, which is probably not something that needed to live on the internet for forever, but that's a separate thing here. Um, but I remember early on it was actually social. It was about, people that you actually knew and connecting with them, and that was, like, the draw to it, and that was the promise of social media was, like, we're going to increase social connection. The reason I wanted to start with this is because I recently watched a video that said that the average person now spends only 7% of their time on social media interacting with people that they know, and, like, at some point, something changed where it's no longer social media and it's just media. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today is like, why did things move this direction? And like, what can we as software engineers think about and like, contribute to this world that is really, we're the ones that are building it. How our input can maybe shape things potentially or not, because big problems are hard. So I want to just talk a little bit about like what social media
Mm,
algorithms are,
mhm.
if somebody wants to like take a stab at like defining that and, what changed in social media that went from this social landscape to what it is today.
I could, I assume this is gonna get cut, but maybe not. If, if you're listening, Brittany just shooed her cat out. Is it um,
Yes.
one other thing is I remember poking people, and I was like, love to poke I just thought it was so funny to poke people. I'd poke, like, my uncle. But, yeah, I could talk about yeah, I could talk about I mean, I think we all can talk about social media algorithms, but I can do that if, you all want. Feel free to elaborate. Yeah, so, I mean, I think, well, I think, Facebook is a good example. I mean, I think for sort of a narrative purpose. So I think when you went on Facebook initially, you would kind of see posts that your friends would make, and maybe they were ordered by date. And then there was the introduction of the news feed, and it used sort of more different algorithms to kind of recommend content to you. And so um, an algorithm is just a series of instructions, and a lot of these platforms use some type of machine learning algorithm. So it's sort of an algorithm that kind of learns from data. These algorithms all have some objective function that they're maximizing over. And so, I think for a lot of these platforms, it's engagement, it's how much you're clicking, and it's often correlated with some type of advertise. You clicking on an advertiser's ad, or you just being on the platform for as long as possible. And so these algorithms are kind of present you content in a way that sort of maximizes that. There's a blend of factors. They also do want to sort of recommend relevant content to you because you're more likely to stay on the platform if you do. But um, yeah,
Yeah.
so
Um, I mean, I think the cycle is a very familiar software cycle where like the sort of like output of the system is like some sort of metric that you're trying to optimize for. So, like you mentioned, time on platform. And so, like these social media platforms um, try to figure out how to optimize for that. So they uh, tailor their algorithm um, to support that. So, like one thing they've figured out is that if you're like in a heightened emotional state, you will stay on the platform for longer. So they'll serve content that puts you in that emotional state, whether it's anger or um, usually anger, frustration, outrage, or like greed. These things that you're like, "Oh, I want more. Oh, I'm so mad. I'm gonna like keep looking at all these things that make me mad." So uh, they they sort of use this as a proximate value for the overall platform, figuring that people who spend more time on the platform, or the more time that's spent on this platform means that it's more valuable overall. Like monthly active users, active user time. They can then use that to tell anyone who wants to advertise on the platform, for example, like, hey, we have, this many people using it. We have, this much amount of time of people like using our platform. So, like, your advertising dollars are best spent here because we're going to get eyeballs on your advertisements. You're going to get the most bang for your buck by, paying us to serve ads. Um, so, I think, you know, I say it's familiar because I don't necessarily think this is like only social media that does this, but it's prevalent in social media, especially Facebook and Instagram, because of the size. Like it's sort of this cycle that grows as the companies grow and develop, and it's sort of like a self-feeding thing. And it affects more people the more people that are on the platform. Um, so that's my take on it.
Yeah, I think that the key here where things changed is in the beginning, there were no advertisements on a lot of these applications. And most of them started out, being super venture capital funded. They had all this money where, getting pumped into them where they didn't have to worry about making money on what it was. And at some point, something changed and they realized, oh, okay, we need to make money. The most likely thing is going to be advertisements. And that means that the more that somebody's here on the platform looking at the platform in general, that means the more ads we can serve them and the more money that we can make. Um, and so trying to that they then became this machine that was trying to design itself to keep people on there as long as possible and to, eat up as much attention as possible because it means more advertising and more money. The other part of it that I think is a little bit more unique to social media, although maybe it's not anymore, um, is the amount of personal data that they can obtain about you to not only serve you ads, but to serve you the most targeted ads and the ads that you are most likely to engage with. Um, just by nature of being the data that they have about, how long you spend looking at this video or how long you spend looking at that or like what your demographics are in terms of like where you are in the world searching and how old you are and all that stuff that's freely available to that platform makes it so that they can also serve you highly targeted ads that make them very valuable ads, which I feel like is another thing that changed over time. Um, and has made them maybe not more nefarious, but more, it is what they are.
And on the topic of data, there's also the monetization vector of selling personal data, um, like for profit in general. Like even if, you know, you're not even using it, you can sell it to someone else who might then use it to develop their platform.
Yeah, and the monetization of it created an entire economy. The creator economy didn't exist before social media platforms existed, and now you can like being an influencer is a job. Um,
Yeah.
like that's a that they're making way more money than we are. Like I mean, the few that are very, very successful, like
Hmm.
that's an entire career too, where like their job is, trying to develop again, similar to the social media companies trying to develop the content that people are most likely to engage with.
Yeah. No, it is. I mean, it is. It is such a. I mean, it's like this is such a trite topic, right? This is like. I mean, it's trite in the sense of like we're so immersed in we're in this age of like social media influencers, people being online. I mean, I the other day I heard. there's a website called OnlyFans where, people sell adult content, and I saw an article saying that someone made, like, literally, like, $80 million in a year selling, pictures. And right, and, all of these are sort of hitting our sort of dopamine reward systems, and having just massive impacts on us on a societal level. And I mean, Erica, you shared like that sort of quote right before we met. And I think, like, obviously incentives play a huge role here. I think Brittany, I know you read this book, Careless People. That was this sort of high level executive at Meta, kind of talking about her experience there. And yeah, and I mean, obviously the social media companies are incentivized to maximize shareholder profit. Humans are easy to manipulate, especially when you have a team of really intelligent people collecting, this sort of this surveillance capitalism regime where they're collecting information about us and then can develop these machine learning models that perfectly manipulate us. I think, there surely needs, I think something needs to change. And I think there are, it's like with Chat GPT, their pricing model, people pay a subscription. Like, we need that for, like, social media a little bit more. And I think people are becoming more cognizant of the effects of social media, especially on kids. But it's just such a wild, you know time. And it's funny, it's like, I see, older relatives in their 50s and 60s glued to their phone, and I'm like, this is like a universal human thing. It's not just us young kids. So um it's kind of crazy to think the impact that this has on our world. And part of that is easily visible when you just look at, like, the earnings of these social media companies. I mean, look at Meta's valuation, look at Snap, look at all these social media companies. Even Google, right? I mean, their primary driver is advertising, targeted ads. And, they're not a social media company per se, but they kind of, are another company that makes money off ads. So it's, yeah, it's wild, and it's hairy, and there's certainly some great things about social media, but there's a lot of, I think we all feel a level of discomfort with sort of how it's played out.
Yeah, and I don't think that there was ever, like, a bunch of software engineers and product people sitting in a room saying, like, "How do we design this thing to, you know, make everybody in the world more, like, angry and more
Yeah.
like, like, increase the polarization of the political system in the United States." Like, I don't think that that was ever something like somebody's intention. It was a bunch of small changes that happened over time where somebody's like, "Hey, why don't we introduce something like the infinite scroll so that, you never stop to,
Yeah.
stop looking at content." Or you are using all this A/B testing just to see, like, hey, if we move this menu here, does that change how long somebody spends on the platform or how often they interact with these things? It's a bunch of little tiny decisions that add up to this big societal decision where we can't just say, like, one person is responsible. It's a lot of little tiny things that have happened over time. And we can see the impact for sure over, like, the entirety of society. The, negative mental health impact on children. I cannot imagine being a teenager right now. Oh my gosh, what they have to
Hmm.
deal with. Um, and, already going through all of the changes that come with being a teenager and also having to deal with, like, these social media influences. When I was a kid, it was just magazines. You could really easily ignore magazine. Everybody was up in arms like, "Oh, these magazines are, like, influencing these kids," and it's like, "Well, if you just don't look at them, then you're good." But, like, that's not possible, I feel like, to interact in daily life now because so much of it happens on the internet.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
I do think that there were points that could have changed, um,
Hmm.
like, the end outcome, though. Like, there's, been, um there's been I don't know if they're, like, leaks or reports of, like, research within, like, I'm pretty sure it was Meta about the effect of, um, like, the platform on mental health for teenage girls.
Hmm.
And, yeah, multiple studies that like surfaced these concerns that we're all raising here. And, I think there was a trade off between profit and fixing parts of the platform that, encouraged those bad outcomes. And in every choice, they chose profit. So, it's like, were they intending for that outcome? No, not necessarily, but when they did find out that that was happening, they didn't course correct.
That's true.
Y
Sorry, I'm not trying to give it out to
Yeah.
out to them there. Yeah,
All
especially
just
being
innocent
careless.
here. We're all just innocent
What could we have
bystanders.
done? We were just writing code, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think, that book, Careless People, is a really good example too, a really good. First of all, it's phenomenally written, but it's also just like a really good example of those different points that came up and what choices were made during those points when it came to like, oh, like this is having a negative impact that we can like measurably see should we do something, and continuously choosing not to do something and to choose profit over that. And I think putting on the engineering brain here, what options are there though to like actually course correct now, given that we live in this, capitalist system where you do kind of have to, I mean, most CEOs are beholden to the shareholders. They can't make a decision that would negatively impact profitability, um, theoretically. Like what is the a bit what do you do now?
Well, so Yuval Noah Harari, he's an author. He's um he's written some good books that I like. I was listening to an interview, and yeah, he talked about having an information diet. So same thing with just like you can go to a grocery store and you could buy foods that if you eat over the long term will make you sick. I think every person needs to have some type of information diet where they are limiting themselves uh, from exposure to content. There's tons of I use tons of these apps like Block Site Freedom to block websites. I'm off Facebook. I deleted my Facebook account in 2017, and I literally have I feel like I've lost nothing, and I'm just happier because I'm someone who I would go on Facebook and compare my life to others and just become depressed. So I'm very I'm not on Instagram. I don't really go on social media. And that just works for me. Obviously, there's lots of if you have a business, advertising on these sites is important. But I do think every individual person needs to have some type of thoughtful strategy to limit their exposure and mitigate the negative consequences of these platforms. And that's just like part of what being a human being is. Now, that being said, I have like a phone addiction. I have a dopamine addiction. I There are platforms that I spend too much time on, and I it's not healthy for me, and it's really difficult, right? Just like sort of, I and so um but it could be worse, I guess.
So as engineers, one important aspect of what we do is being cognizant of the like human impact that what we're building is having, and pushing to not only measure things like engagement time, but also um, like this idea of like human centered metrics. So like, you know, how how is this affecting the users? Like, um, and finding ways to measure that, making sure that like we bring it up as a part of these discussions of what we're building. Um, yeah, and if we when we do find things that are seemingly negatively impacting the human experience, however we're measuring these principles, um like pushing back and saying like we need to roll this back, we need to make a different decision, um and pushing for that, and uh yeah, so I think that's an important concept to keep in mind. I also understand that, like, in some of these big corporations, you're gonna be told potentially that it's not like that's not what we're doing and you have to do something else, and like that's a really tough place to be in. And yeah, I mean then you kind of have career decisions to make. Um but I think at least understanding like our agency here and sort of like adopting the mindset that um we don't want to do any harm, and like, but like also knowing that there needs to be a way to quantify that and like measure it. um yeah, like I think that's the best thing that we can do in our day to day.
I really
Yeah.
like that, Erica. I think that's yeah. And I think yeah, measuring negative externalities, like if as an engineering, I think is important and difficult, and I think that's why bad things happen is because people don't care about or even know about negative externalities.
Yeah. I think one big thing that comes to mind, that I often think of with like these large problems. I actually have a background in public health. I have a master's degree in public health that I'm clearly not using, but it did come with a lot of like learning about how to, manage the health of the public as it comes out. And most of the time that results, like the main thing to reach for is regulation. I don't know how effective that would be in this case. I mean, I think it would be better than doing nothing, but, like, watching the videos of the people in Congress, like, asking questions about how phones work, I don't know. We need some sort of governing body that's not just the people in Congress to
Yeah.
make those decisions, if that were to exist.
So here's I agree. I think that especially like given the precedent of legislation around social media, there's okay, it's like the bill that was passed like back in 1996 that said like it's been cited a bunch to like, absolve social media companies of any responsibility, and it was intended to allow, the development of communication technology, but now is basically used as like it's not our problem. um and as far as I know, there's no like current regulation really in flight. And there's been like it's hard to regulate the processes of a technology company because it gets really hairy. Where my mind goes first for effective regulation is profit caps, because what we're saying is like, well, part of the root cause here is that we're optimizing for profitability. If we say, actually, this is the absolute maximum that a social media company can make as far as profits go. Anything over that cap needs to be reinvested in like community projects like education, public health, I don't know, the environment. Like we're using gigantic data centers that are like environmentally problematic. Like if we cap that profit and reinvest it into things that are actually positive for our society, I think that could have positive effects not only on, the investments that are made, but also in sort of cutting off this like terrible cycle of like maximizing profitability.
Interesting. Yeah, I haven't heard that theory before, but I do think, like, that makes a lot of sense. Are there other examples in the United States where that, like, exists? Where most of these companies are located? Like, are profit caps a thing?
I thought at one time OpenAI, because they were technically a nonprofit, they have a weird OpenAI. I don't know if you've read about OpenAI's like legal kind of incorporation, but yeah, I don't think I mean, it's obvious. Yeah, I don't think profit caps are a very American thing. And yeah, it is funny. There's sort of a bunch of like Congress is, kind of a lot of like corrupt. Yeah, it's like I don't know if I have a lot of faith. I don't know if anyone or the majority of America has a lot of faith in Congress. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the closest thing I can think of is, like, income taxes, and I know there are, like, corporate taxes, and there must be, like, corporate tax brackets. I'm not as familiar with, like, the tax code and all that to, um, intelligently speak to it, but, yeah, even if it's not a thing, I think it needs to be introduced.
Yeah. I do feel like, yeah, I personally, it does need to be introduced. My ability to do anything with regards to legislature is basically none. So my opinion here, I like sort of what Erica said about, personal responsibility as a software engineer. As a software engineer, we have a lot of say in the things that we build. Now, we might not be making product decisions, but like we are making many, many micro decisions every single day over time that add up to what these products eventually become. And so the thing that I think of as like one way to handle something that is negatively impacting society like this would be some sort of like code of ethics or something like that as software engineers to say like, hey, if we notice something that is causing harm because of the thing that we are working on, um causing undue harm that is not what it's designed to cause, I suppose, uh, then we should be able to, speak up and have some sort of way of, you know, referring to, some sort of board of licensure or something like that where we can say like, "Hey, like I'm reporting this somewhere so that we know that, this decision is being made intentionally and not because of, these byproducts of all of these just different decisions."
Mm,
I feel like
yeah.
this exists in a lot of other career paths, like things like the thing that I think about is like doctors. Doctors have like a code of ethics that they have to follow to say like I'm going to do no harm. Um and I feel like the same thing should be applied to the software engineering level because we are seeing how much harm is caused by a lot of the software that is being built.
Yeah, I think the key point that's missing there is that there's no license to practice software engineering. Um,
Mm,
like, because when you have like a, you know, an ethical violation for a doctor, for example, they take away your license to practice medicine. Um, but unless you have that for software engineers, like, you know, I don't know, you have to, like, I guess the process would be like, you can't put anything on the open internet unless you have um a software license, or like you have to report on your website like this was created or hosted by somebody who's not a licensed software technologist or something like that. um which is possible, like we do that with SSL and stuff like that for protection and encryption. So it's not necessarily out of the realm of possibility, but that would that would have to be um, there would have to be a layer there of compliance and um, adoption.
yeah, I mean, it's like on one hand, this feels like very futile. I don't know. It's like I don't know if like the individual, can you sort of rely on like the individual goodwill of software engineers or like morality of software engineers to do anything? Like ideally there would just be like a different incentive structure that like penalized people that were actually doing harm to society. Maybe that was through fines, government fines, or regulations that if companies violated, they would either, there'd be some punitive damages, or punitive recourse. And I think like, but yeah, it's hard because yeah, it's like, do we think that our legislature has the ability to come up with a good incentive structure? I don't know. But I feel like that's probably like the best way is to, just realign the incentives so companies aren't incentivized to just like, oh hey, if we like exploit all these people, we'll make a ton of money. Because I just think that's gonna keep on happening. Um
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, the problem with lawsuits is that they're expensive, and they're expensive, they're time consuming, and money can trump the law in a lot of cases. So
yeah.
that's why that approach has been ineffective up to this point, is because these companies have so much money that they can buy their way out of these problems.
Yeah, but,
Yeah.
pretty crazy.
Yeah, solving the world's problems here. As we've also alluded to talking about thinking and systems, I mean, a lot of these are very large, complex systems that I don't think there's a one
Yeah,
size approach that would fix anything, but I feel like doing nothing is probably not the right move.
yeah,
I mean, one other, like, you know, somewhat dumb idea, but could potentially be applied is like a harm warning, um, and also like a screen time cap. So this is an idea sort of inspired by like regulation of the tobacco industry, right? So at some point, we realized the tobacco industry was harmful. We require them to put warning labels on every package. Um, you know, that could be applied to social media saying like this, the content here could be inaccurate or harmful to your health, mental health, and then, somehow capping the amount of time that you spend. So, like, only allowing users to actually spend what's considered like a healthy amount of social media time. So like requiring the companies to cut off any given user. Um, Now, of course, you could get around that by creating multiple accounts if you're really, really inspired. But I think for the most part, if you cut people's access off at like an hour a day, something like that, um, like that could go a long way to um reducing some of this, like again, the like the maximizing uh that we were talking about that the algorithms optimize for.
yeah. And I think that's a really interesting idea, and I wonder if in, like, 15 years or something, or we'll see that. I mean, obviously, one difference is, like, the effects smoking has on you is universally bad. It's, like, pretty easy to measure. Social media, it's, like, a little bit more complicated. I mean, I'm sure there are some people who consume a lot of social media that don't have the same sort of mental health effects as others. I mean, it's a lot more varied, but yeah,
I mean, I guess the
um,
counter argument to that is like like the overall effects of social media have been very well researched and documented. And like the same argument could be applied for like not everyone who smokes get cancer, but like,
yeah,
it's pretty likely that you will have negative
yeah,
health impacts from smoking. Not everybody does, but most people do, Same like you said with Facebook. It's like, okay, like I left it. I am happier now. Like,
mhm,
even if you didn't have like a diagnosed problem with Facebook, same with me. Like, you know, the less I engage with social media, the happier I feel. To me,
yeah,
that's anecdotal. I don't know if I have any hard data to back that up, but
mm,
to me, that's reason and evidence enough that it's harmful on the whole.
yeah,
I think one of the things, sort of what John is speaking to there, though, too, is like in the world of studying public health, it's really hard to prove something without a doubt causes harm. You have to have a huge body of evidence to say, hey, this particular product causes harm. So there's a lot of things. That's why everybody always says, like, oh, everything causes cancer. It's because, well, yeah, it does. It's just really hard to equate, this thing to causing cancer. We had a huge body of evidence that smoking causes cancer, and we can say, like, it increases the risk, and so that's why we can put those warnings on things. Um, but it gets more difficult with things like that, like you said, that are harder to quantify, like mental health problems. That's a very difficult thing to quantify compared to like a physical disease. And that also requires a body of legislature that makes decisions based on science. Um, like you have you have to have somebody,
mhm,
some adult in the room that actually says, like, yes, not only is this science saying that this is a thing that's a problem, we have to believe it. And that is also increasingly problematic as time goes on. In part because of the mind brainwashing that can come in the echo chambers that can come from social media platforms. Like the entire anti-vax movement can pretty much be pinpointed back to Facebook groups. which is crazy that like, that's where it proliferated and like gained traction is like in these social media environments. So
Yeah.
it's a reinforcing problem.
Unfortunately, science doesn't make money unless you can sell it.
That's true. That's true. We need to make science profitable.
Yeah.
Uh, but with that, this has been a really fun conversation. I don't know that we solved the world's problems, but it was really fun talking about them with you all and just going through this. So we're going to get into our fun segment after that heavy conversation. We're going to talk about things we've learned recently that may or may not be fun. It's up to you, I guess, whether that thing is a fun thing or not. But did somebody want to go first?
How you go? I've been learning about how rockets work recently. I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos, and I bought a textbook on propulsion, and yeah, rockets are pretty cool.
Newly relevant for you.
Yes, newly relevant for me.
Do you want to go next, Erica?
Um, well, I mentioned that we went to Colorado last week, and I have a 2-year-old daughter, and, I learned, uh, I I only mostly knew the words to Let It Go. I now can sing it back and forth, uh, due to all the car time where she was requesting the song to be played and replayed, and I sang along every time.
That's amazing. I also have a 2-year-old that is obsessed with Let It Go right now, and it's
Yeah.
one of the most adorable things I think ever. That's great.
'Cause, I guess I did learn today through this episode that there is a code of ethics and professional conduct for, um, computing professionals. So we can add that to the show notes in case anyone else is interesting. It's a, self opt-in, ethical code, sort of inspired by medical professionals and engineering professionals. I did not know it existed at all before, so that was something that I learned.
Yeah, we can definitely share that. I'll include that in the show notes. Through ACM, correct? That's something. I mean, that's a thing that I feel like I've mentioned before needs to exist. Apparently, it does exist. So I need to sign up too and figure out, what that means. I think that's great. Um, I learned recently how to lay bricks in a retaining wall project that has lasted the last month and it's looking good. I'm building stairs with these bricks too, which is something that I do not feel qualified to do. Anything that's like a physical thing, like I feel fine when I'm building software, but anything that goes into the physical realm, I don't feel like I'm qualified to do. But this is actually coming along and it's been really fun and I'm excited to be done with it soon and like enjoy the new yard once it's all done. And that's really been a lot of my time outside of work. I've been like taking a break from being overcommitted to many different things, and it's been really nice. Just enjoying the summer. All right. With that, thank you so much for tuning in to Overcommitted. If you like what you hear, please do follow, subscribe, or do whatever it is you do on the podcast app of your choice. Leave a review. Those are very helpful for us to get more people to find us if that's, if it's something that they like. Check us out on Blue Sky and please share with your friends. And as a reminder, we still have the Looks Good to Me book club, and there's still plenty of time to get involved. If you would like to do that asynchronously, check out the show notes for more info. And until next week, goodbye.